In this example, we're going to open up two views and tile them together. In the project browser, go ahead and open up the 03 third floor column detail. We'll now tile the two views together. So to do this, we'll use a keyboard shortcut. So we'll type in WT and you can now see the two views are tiled. We'd also want to zoom all the views. So again, we'll use another keyboard shortcut, ZA. Before we add reinforcement to the column, we'll take a look at the cover settings and how we apply cover to the elements. To do this, we'll select the Structure tab. And in the Reinforcement panel, you'll note that we can select Cover. On the Options bar, you'll notice here that we have two options to place cover. We can do it for the entire element, or we can select an individual face and then apply cover to those selected faces. If we take our cursor into the plan view, we'll clearly see a green dotted line which is representing the current rebar cover. Let's select the column. And again on the options bar, you can see that we can select various different covers from a set list. Currently, you'll notice the cover is set to 1.5 inches. If we wanted to create new cover settings, we could select the button to the right of the drop-down menu. And now you can see in the Rebar Cover Settings dialog, we can either duplicate existing settings and amend those, or we can add new settings here. Let's go ahead and select OK to the Rebar Cover Setting dialog. We'll now add some rebar to our column. So again, on the Structure tab in the Reinforcement panel, let's select Rebar. On the Modify Rebar tab, you'll notice in the Placement Methods panel, we have various different ways of placing out reinforcement. The default, which is what we're going to use here, is Expand to Host. However, if we didn't want that behaviour, we could actually define the reinforcement by picking 2 points. We can also select Freeform Rebar for more complex operations, or finally we can sketch the shape of reinforcement that we want. You can see the placement plane can also be selected. The default in this case is current work plane, which is what we're actually going to use, but for example if we were placing reinforcement into a wall, we might want to place it on the near face of the wall or the far face of the wall. So you can see we can select those various different options that we might want. Also, if we take a look at the placement orientation, in this case we want to place the rebar parallel to the work plane. However, we might want that to be parallel to cover or perpendicular to the cover. You'll also notice now that we have the Rebar Shape Browser visible in the interface. This allows us to select our reinforcement shape from the loaded rebars in our current project. In this example here, we're going to make sure that we've selected shapecode T1. If the Rebar Shape Browser is closed down, we can start up the Rebar Shape Browser again by going into the Options bar and selecting Launch Close Rebar Shape Browser. In the Properties palette in the Type Selector, you'll notice here that we're using rebar number 3. If we wanted to choose a new bar diameter, we could go to the drop down here and we could select the rebar diameter that we want to use. In this case, we are going to use the rebar type number 3. Let's now take our cursor into the plan view, and you can clearly see now we have our shape previewed within the model. Notice that the hooks are displayed in the top right hand corner of the column. If we want to cycle these, we can press the spacebar, and you'll now notice the hook is cycling to each of the 4 corners of the rebar shape. We'll position the hooks in the top right hand corner and left click to place out the rebar. We'll then exit the command by selecting Modify on the Modify Rebar tab. Looking into the 3D view, if we zoom up on the link that we've just placed, we can clearly see that we have a clash here. So I'm going to select the reinforcement shape, and in the Properties palette you'll notice the current shape is T1. Let's go ahead and select T2, and we can now see the clash has been resolved. Also notice in the 3D view that the rebar is shown as a solid. If we want to control this, we can go down to the View Control bar and we can simply change the detail level from Fine to either Medium or Coarse. And here you'll now notice that all the rebars are shown in wireframe. Let's go back and change this to a fine level of detail to see all the rebars represented as solids. Of course, in this example we're going to want more than one reinforcement bar, so we'll select the shape that we've just placed out. And looking up onto the Modify Rebar tab in the Rebar Set panel, you can see that the layout rule is currently a single reinforcement bar. Let's now amend this to maximum spacing. You'll now notice that the rebars are distributed up the column, and the rebars are constrained to the start and end cover that we've just applied to our column. Let's now look at some of the other layout rules. So currently we're using maximum spacing. However, we could use the spinner buttons here to increase or decrease the number of reinforcement bars within the column. Another layout rule is to use number with spacing, and here we have a count. So in this case we have 32 links, and then we can define our spacing below. In this case we'll go back to maximum spacing, and we'll set our maximum spacing of 4 inches. Okay, so there are our stirrups placed out. Go ahead and save the model.